is National 9 Early News with Sharon Godella.
This morning, the Prime Minister heads to Japan to discuss the future of car manufacturing jobs in Australia. The Queen Mother admitted to a London hospital, and Australia prepares to wrap up the Ashes series. Good morning. Claims today Mitsubishi plans to close its 2 Adelaide car manufacturing plants next year as part of a restructuring plan to help the financially stricken automaker. It's believed Prime Minister John Howard will be informed of the decision when he arrives in Japan for talks with business leaders and his Japanese counterpart.
Mr. Howard is scheduled to have high-level talks with Mitsubishi executives after arriving in Tokyo today.
We have already provided very significant benefits to the motor manufacturing industry. We wanted to stay in Australia.
What Mitsubishi have said to me in 97 and 99 is they want a review of the impact of the tariff cuts that have been costing jobs in Australia.
Labor is considering cutting car tariffs, but it may be too late. The car maker's parent company, Daimler Chrysler, is expected to decide soon whether it will use its Australian factories for a new model or close them down. Mitsubishi has issued a statement from its Japanese headquarters reassuring thousands of its Australian workers they have a future with the company. It says Mitsubishi Motors Corporation remains committed to the Australian market and we have no plans at this time to change our operations. Earlier this year, it was believed the car maker was withdrawing from the Australian market after a huge global loss of $4.5 billion in the year to March. After facing an uncertain future, workers briefly celebrated when it was announced it would be business as usual. Now their future is again in doubt.
At Lonsdale, where I work, there's no morale. It's very low. People don't know from one day to the next whether they've got a job.
Arabella Fingleton, National 9 News.
A more immediate problem for Mitsubishi and other car manufacturers is an industrial dispute at a vehicle component factory in Sydney. Strike action by employees of TriStar could bring the entire Australian automotive production industry to a standstill, with 25,000 workers stood down. Holden's Adelaide factory has already closed. Ford is expected to shut down its Melbourne operation today, and Toyota and Mitsubishi are likely to face problems next week. Union officials say they'll meet with TriStar staff this morning, but expect the dispute to continue. The long-awaited Darwin to Dili gas pipeline project, estimated to be worth $13 billion to the Northern Territory, is under threat. Phillips Petroleum has been forced to delay indefinitely building the line to East Timor after experiencing legal and taxation problems. The deferral is expected to threaten the re-election hopes of Northern Territory Chief Minister Dennis Burke. Prime Minister John Howard has given his firmest commitment yet. The government will reduce income tax. But there are 2 ifs. If his government wins the next election and if the budget will allow for the cuts. As expected, it drew a swift response from the opposition.
The details may have been vague, but the message couldn't have been clearer. In an address to the National Press Club, the Prime Minister hitched his government's electoral fortunes to the promise of future income tax cuts.
Further reductions in income tax must be on the political agenda in Australia. That is why, as surpluses become available, they will be returned to the Australian people through lower personal income tax.
Among the options actively being considered, the indexation of income tax rates to offset the impact of bracket creep.
Obviously, bracket creep is an option. I'm not going to say, I can't say any more, and I won't say any more than that.
Opposition leader Kim Beazley was also talking tax cuts, not on personal income, but the GST.
We are going to lower the GST by taking it off items which affect people, families, pensioners. That's where we think the tax cutting needs to be done.
As for the Prime Minister's promises, Mr Beazley says Mr Howard can't be trusted.
But this Prime Minister's promises on tax can't be believed. How's he going to pay for them?
And that, of course, is precisely the question Mr Howard is asking about Labor's promises.
How can you simultaneously roll back the GST in any meaningful way, maintain the surplus, not take it away from the states, finance additional spending without putting up income tax?
I've said we're not going to increase taxes. That's what we're going to do. Sure, it's across the board.
Ultimately, the election may well come down to which of the 2 parties the electorate believes can in fact deliver on their promises. And neither side, it seems, is absolutely convinced the voters will buy it.
You always develop a bit of a nervous edge as you get closer to the event, of course.
If we don't win, we don't win.
Laurie Wilson, National 9 News.
Lack of communication and damaged roads are hampering Indonesian efforts to search for survivors in the wake of a landslide. So far, around 60 people have been confirmed dead on the island of Nias off Sumatra, but it's feared the toll could rise, with around 800 reportedly missing. Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs is in contact with authorities in Indonesia to see if any tourists are among the dead and missing. The island is a popular destination for Australian surfers. The death of 3 Sydney patients who were given the wrong blood type during separate transfusions will now be the subject of an inquest. According to police, in the most recent case, an argument among medical staff, a new computer system